Hello. Today's episode number 23 of the Professor Slots podcast describes winning strategy 1, only win immediately, plus slot machine casino gambling in the U.S. state of Maine. Thank you for joining me for the Professor Slots podcast show. I'm John Friedel, and this is the podcast about slot machine casino gambling. It is where I provide the knowledge, insights, and tools for helping you improve your slot machine gambling performance. Show notes are available within most podcast apps or at professorslots.com/E23.
John Friedel from the Professor Slots blog reveals all his tips and tricks for thriving in the casino environment. Choose winning slot machines and identify your gambling goals. Being entertained, earning comps, winning take-home cash, or combining them. John has won 90 taxable jackpots and a luxury car in 9 months of slot play and made a profit at slots gambling since 2013.
In case you missed it, on last week's episode, I went over who sets winning odds, specifically that casinos with control over slots like to tinker with the odds of winning to improve financial performance, which just so happens to generate winning patterns to be exploited by slots enthusiasts. Also last week, I reviewed Louisiana slot machine casino gambling, including how the gaming industry has become an important part of Louisiana's culture and economy, including the spread of video poker across loosely defined truck stops. I hope you enjoyed listening to my last episode as much as I enjoyed making it for you. Remember to visit professorslots.com/subscribe to get my free report revealing the top 7 online resources for improving your gambling performance, including the one I've used as a top-tier slot machine casino gambler. Let's get started with the first segment of the show. Winning Strategy 1. Only win immediately. As I've mentioned for some time, winning strategies exist for slot machines at newer-style casinos. Beginning with this episode on Winning Strategy 1, Only Win Immediately, I'll start explaining those winning strategies my gaming research has uncovered can happen at a few of the newer casinos. Recall that I've identified newer casinos as any gambling facility built or heavily renovated since about 2012. But what if you don't gamble at a newer casino? Well then, make sure to check out my descriptions of the only way I know how to win at older-style casinos by taking a listen to Professor Slots podcast number 21, Winning at Slots at Older Casinos, Kentucky Slots 2018. Again, that's Professor Slots podcast episode number 21. My prior podcast episodes have provided slots basics as well as stories of my slot machine gambling experiences. These have laid the foundation for more detailed analysis and explanations on how to improve the odds of winning when playing slot machines. As mentioned, I've already covered the single approach that can be taken with less modern gaming technologies. Beginning with this episode, I'll begin providing systematic yet straightforward analytical explanations to what can be, and indeed was, learned from my gambling experiences at modern, newer casinos. These systematic analytical explanations might alternatively be called winning strategies. This segment has the following subsections. 1. An introduction. 2. Not all winning strategies will work at your casino. 3. 7 winning strategies at newer casinos. 4. Getting started with this strategy. 5. My personal bias towards high-limit slots. 6. How I learned this strategy. 7. Some disadvantages. 8. Some big advantages. 9. Its impact on gambling goals. 10. Thoughts on optimizing the strategy. And 11. A summary. These strategies can help players to win. People work hard to succeed at their regular jobs every day. Why should success at gambling be any different? Players need to learn the skills necessary to get ahead, to do better, even if it is just to get a little ahead. If a player's goal with slots gambling is to make money, then that is what they need to figure out how to do. Also, I need to make clear to you that these strategies don't always work. Why? Because the patterns they are taking advantage of may or may not exist at the casino you visit. Why might these winning patterns not exist? Because these winning patterns are man-made. Whether they work or not depends entirely upon the specific casino being visited. Because of this, you'll need to become an experimenter. That is to say, you'll need to get used to checking a casino for winning patterns to take advantage of. I'll explain the patterns I've found, and I'll explain how to make the most out of them. Your job is to try to find them yourself wherever you can. To do that, you'll likely need to experiment. Whether or not you also try to make the most out of the winning patterns I'll be identifying is entirely your financial decision. Once again, please remember the number one rule of casino gambling. The only money you should take to a casino is money you can afford to comfortably lose. I've already previously explained how to improve the odds of winning at older style slot machines, which have not been renovated to the latest in gaming technologies, including how to recognize older style slots from newer style slots found in new and recently renovated casino venues. I've already further described the technological differences between these two types of slot machines and why they are important to understand when applying techniques that try to improve the odds of winning. Having already made these descriptions, the bulk of the content I'll be presenting next describes strategies that can be used to improve the odds of winning at slot machine gambling at newer casinos. Anyone can apply these strategies to their own gambling goals and player styles. While I've already discussed choosing gambling goals, I've yet to do the same for the player styles I've also identified. I'll explain these 6 different player styles at a later time, including how to develop an overall approach or even an individualized campaign to improve your odds of winning at slot machine gambling. The 7 strategies I've so far identified are: win immediately at a slot machine, then nothing. I also call this a cheap way to win. Advantage plays with progressive slot machines. Complimentary gifts as compensation. Winning advantages of special events. The most reliable holiday patterns. Playing a slot machine showing a win, and win a jackpot, then return later. As I discuss each of these strategies in upcoming episodes, I'll also include the advantages and disadvantages of each strategy. I'll also discuss how best to combine them to optimize performance for maximum profits, although this will be after I've explained each one. The strategies to follow are meant to improve your odds of winning so that overall you are making money. That is to say, getting a greater than 100% return or payout percentage on your bankroll, rather than losing the average 90 to 95% expected loss per bankroll cycle. This doesn't mean that your gambling goal is to make money. You can choose to spend this money back into the machine and earn maximum comps, for instance, or have maximum enjoyment. But you need to be able to increase your return in order to meet your gambling goals. During playing sessions, when casinos have systematically reduced the overall odds of winning for whatever economic reason they might have for doing so, these strategies will again improve your odds of winning. However, gaming economics and casino financial projections being relatively unknown to players, these strategies may or may not result in a greater than 100% return, even if they do provide an optimal playing performance. Put another way, the house really does want to win. Again, the strategies to be discussed may not apply at the casino or casinos you frequent. Additionally, be wary of applying them at Native American or tribal casinos, as the rules of operation at these casinos are based on their unique business contracts with the state, rather than effectively generic state gambling laws as applied to non-tribal commercial casinos. After over a dozen visits within 3 months at a secondary pari-mutuel racino, I identified a clear pattern to winning I'd not seen before. Once I proceeded to use it, I won 6 taxable jackpots over the next 2 months. And as you should be asking yourself at this point, did I make a profit? Yes, I did. The beauty of this rather powerful strategy is that nearly all the revenue won is profit. The pattern I discovered was simply this. Every taxable jackpot I won occurred within the first few plays or bets on the machine. After that first jackpot, either large or taxable or small and not taxable, I wouldn't win another jackpot for what seemed like, in my experience, a very long time. I saw this behavior again and again from all of the slot machines I played at that particular pari-mutuel racino. As per usual when I first visited, I'd engaged in conversations with slot attendants and floor managers about recent jackpot winners. They told me about slot machine gamblers who had won quite a few taxable jackpots in the high limits area when moving from machine to machine, one taxable jackpot after another. Obviously, this newly renovated casino had set up the slot machines to perform in this manner as a way to control their profits. Unfortunately for the casino employing this type of setup, this setup can be heavily leveraged by the savvy player that spots this easy-to-see pattern. So, going forward, I decided to play only high-limit slot machines for 5 spins or until I won any sort of jackpot, whichever occurred first. Next, I made a not unreasonable assumption that this pattern applied to every machine in the high-limit slots room. Combining this with my general approach, I applied this approach only to those slot machines I'd previously assessed as being worthy of playing. Meaning, I played only the slot machines that I decided fit my winning slot machine criteria. At the time, this was to have multipliers, high limits, usually with bonus spins available. Please understand that at this time I had not yet developed the goodness ratio. Finally, and this is something I really thought was interesting, I realized that this pattern didn't require much money to be successful. I decided I'd try using it with a relatively small bankroll of $500 within that casino's high-limit slot machine area. As an aside, I recently received an email response pointing out that I usually only talk about high-limit slots. In other words, I have a player style that tends towards high-limit slots. This is a personal choice on my part and does not impact whether or not any of these winning strategies can be used. They are equally applicable to any denomination or credits bet, not just so-called high-limit slots. Let's get back to my story about how I learned of this winning strategy. I carefully made my desired bankroll in overtime pay, waited for payday, withdrew the bankroll from my bank account, and went back to the casino intent on using this and only this strategy to assess its relative level of success. I'd sit at one slot machine, put the whole bankroll into it, and played maximum bets until I'd placed 5 bets or won anything. Then I'd move to the next slot machine and repeat the process. I did this again and again on machine after machine, right down one row of machines, then up another row. In all, at that time for that casino, I'd usually win a jackpot before spending 25% of my bankroll on any individual high-limit slot machine. During the visit that I first deliberately tried this strategy, I won 3 taxable jackpots on 3 different machines in 25 minutes, each jackpot occurring about 6 to 7 minutes apart. Thankfully, the slot operators at this new casino were highly efficient, using smart devices on their arms to communicate with each other and the cashier's cage. Nevertheless, each time I won a taxable jackpot, it took about 5 minutes for the slot operator to come, take my government-issued ID, complete the paperwork, clear the machine, then go off to retrieve my hand payout for the jackpot I just won. It was at this point that I'd cash out of the slot machine I was on and move to the next machine, where I'd proceed to again win a jackpot within only a couple of plays. Once again, the slot operators would arrive to complete the hand payout requirements. For this second taxable jackpot, one so soon after the first, I could not offer them my ID. It was still in the hands of the first slot operator. I did still have my player's card, though. Thankfully, they seemed to understand and accept this circumstance, so they proceeded to complete the paperwork, clear the machine, and go away to retrieve that particular jackpot. I repeated this process yet a third time on the next machine in the row of slot machines. In this way, while clearly using this strategy, I won 3 taxable jackpots within 25 minutes with an actual playing time of about 10 to 15 minutes. Total profit was $6,100 for a 1,200% return on a $500 bankroll. I call this next section Some Disadvantages. There are, as with most winning strategies, downsides when using this pattern that savvy players should be aware of. First, it's a highly obvious pattern. Not only is it relatively easy to figure out, it is easy to notice when someone else is doing it. Second, if a player sits down at the next machine and notices that the last spin was a win, then they may need to skip this particular slot machine. I'll talk more about variations of this in a moment. But more precisely, all slot machines should be skipped if they've been played recently. It can be difficult to visit casinos during those times of the day when slot machines have not been played for at least a few hours. As a consequence, even in a high-limit slots area, most slot machines are actively played within a given 24 hours or so. Consequently, this strategy works best if playing slot machines at odd hours, when at least a few of them haven't been played fairly recently. It can be inconvenient to play very early in the morning, say at 5 a.m. However, I found between noon and 2 p.m. on Sundays to be nearly as good a time to play as any, and more convenient than some. Here are a couple of corollaries to this approach, which should be mentioned as they can make a positive difference. First, consider $1 100 denomination slot machines. I don't often play $100 bet machines because I used to waste a lot of money trying, but I found this strategy to be favorable for doing so. This next section is called Several Big Advantages. In my experience, using this strategy is the only method I've found that sometimes can result in a jackpot from a $100 denomination slot machine. I must confide that I find it quite exciting to win any amount of jackpot on a $100 bet machine, where even the smallest jackpots can go over the $1,200 taxable limit. Second, sometimes playing a slot machine already showing a jackpot is actually a very good idea. Often, players will avoid a slot machine showing a big win. Sometimes they will avoid it for days. So if this winning pattern is in effect by a casino, that becomes the machine to play simply because it has not been played for so long. Once, I went to this casino one Friday evening for reconnaissance purposes and saw a one-credit, $100 denomination machine showing a large jackpot win. It was still there the next evening when I again visited for research purposes. Finally, when I returned the following early afternoon at my usual time of playing, I saw that the same large jackpot was still showing. It was still showing the same jackpot. I then consciously realized that I knew that it hadn't been played in over 2 days. I immediately hurried over, put $100 in the machine, and on the first button push, won a $5,000 jackpot. For me, that experience provided substantial validation for this winning strategy. I now had direct evidence that a machine hadn't been played, had predicted a jackpot would be won quickly, and then proceeded to do just that. It is worth pointing out that playing in this pattern can be highly disruptive to employing other winning strategies, patterns, or approaches. Why? Because it's such a cheap way to win at slots. When taking a relatively small bankroll is more than enough money to win with even less probably being enough, why bother trying another approach that requires a larger bankroll, takes more time and energy to succeed, and still has the potential to lose that larger bankroll when unsuccessful? This is a winning pattern that is disruptive to gambling because it hardly seems like gambling. It either works or it doesn't, and either way, the experience is over very quickly. It has also the consequence of not being conducive to accumulating points in players' rewards club systems, resulting in the subsequent loss of those comps. Perhaps these consequences matter to individual players, to their individual gambling goals, but perhaps they do not. It depends on each player's style of gambling. Specifically, whether this winning strategy has a positive or negative impact on your gambling goals depends on what your gambling goals are. To optimize this winning strategy, each week, a player could make many short visits to a casino for relatively very little cost and high likelihood of financial profit, if that casino has set up its jackpots this way. So many trips may increase the total amount of miles on your vehicle, of course. If a player finds a casino presenting this kind of pattern, the absolute best way of maximizing payout would involve making a decision about how often to visit. A decision will be needed to determine how often a prior visit and when doesn't interfere with the player's current visit and possible wins. Should a player visit every morning during the week before the casino gets busy, or should they visit every other day? I've found that every day is too often, but every other day is about right. However, it is not entirely consistent, likely due to every day at the casino being somewhat different in terms of how busy they get. Some days have special events, like it's a race day, or perhaps it's some sort of holiday. Mondays are not Tuesdays, Tuesdays are not Wednesdays, Wednesdays are not Thursdays, and nothing's quite like a Friday, and Saturday's got its own special purpose, and Sunday's different too. Maybe it's the end of the fiscal month, or the end of the financial quarter, or game day, whatever the specific sport is. Even the weather, the season of the year, can have an effect on casino attendance. All of these kinds of events can disrupt the best frequency of visits for this winning pattern. Once again, remember that expecting to win is unrealistic. A player's goal is to improve their odds so that they win more often than not, so that they make some amount of money rather than lose some amount of money. They don't have to take it home. They can use it on comps. They can use it on longer entertainment, but it all adds up. Also, remember that confirmation of success only comes from the spreadsheet recording your stake, wins, and net return per casino visit. In a later episode, I'll go over several useful record-keeping methods for determining if you are indeed coming out ahead or if it only seems like you are. Again, when using this strategy, watch for slot machines that show wins, especially taxable jackpots. Other players will assume that that slot machine should be avoided by assuming that it has just paid out. It is more likely to happen with taxable jackpots. However, as previously discussed, that machine could actually have been sitting idle for an extensive period of time, and if this strategy is in effect at that casino, it is quite likely to provide another jackpot. What is important here is, how long has it been since an idle machine has been played? I've even gone so far as to record the displayed real symbols on slot machines, then returned a day later to play any of those machines still showing the same real combination. I still think this is a fine approach, but it is also rather time-consuming, except that what I learned was that absolutely none of the real combinations were the same between one weekday to the next. In other words, all the slot machines were used by at least one player over the 24 hours I was away, even though it was a weekday, which I had assumed would be a slower day for the casino. There are some possibilities here for finding an effective way to note which slot machine has or has not been played, and there might be different times of the year when this works better than others. The lesson I learned here was that 24 hours was too long of a period to wait for a machine to be idle. If none are idle that long, then a shorter idle period is needed. A good assumption is that evenings see the most player activity, so an improved strategy would be to visit the casino in the morning to record the real combinations, then again just before players started arriving at, say, 4 p.m. on a weekday. The inconvenience of this optimized approach is, in a word, tedium. It requires enduring repeated daily visits to a casino as well as accurately recording real combinations on up to 50 high-limit slot machines. Personally, I tried the 24-hour idle approach for about a week when I was living within 20 minutes of the casino where the strategy was working well. Then, not long after, I moved to 60 miles away from that casino, so never felt that I had as good as an opportunity to try the 8-hour idle approach. Nor did I ever get truly effective at noting the real combinations shown on all those slot machines. And finally, casinos don't like you pulling out a book and writing down numbers when you're looking at a slot machine. They will come over and next thing you know, you will have a man or a woman in a suit standing next to you asking you what the heck you're doing. Keep in mind that these personal inconveniences are only that, personal inconveniences. It's not like I didn't make a substantial profit by using this approach. The $5,000 taxable jackpot that I won after one push of the button on a $100 one-credit slot machine that I had originally noticed had been showing the same jackpot for over 2 days has more than financially compensated for the gas and mileage of daily visits to that casino well into the future. So there is that. In summary, winning strategies exist. The first such that I've just presented that I've discovered at newer style casinos is winning strategy 1, win immediately only. Prior content on slots basics alongside my slot machine casino gambling experiences has provided a foundation. This foundation of ideas and perspective now allows more detailed and analytical explanations, which is where winning strategies reside. First, I warned how not all winning slot strategies will work at casinos you visit. Not only do they need to be modern casinos, but it would be best to mentally prepare yourself that winning at slots is a thinking person's game. There's quite a bit more to it than simply pushing a button. Next, I mentioned that winning strategy 1, only win immediately, is only first in a series of winning strategies on which I'll be discussing in the near future. This is followed by a brief introduction to that winning strategy number 1. After that, I confessed my own bias towards high-limit slots, which in no way is a requirement for successfully using any of these winning strategies. As usual, remember to only take to the casino money you can afford to comfortably lose. Further, I provided the story of how exactly I personally learned this winning strategy. Then I proceeded to go over both its advantages, disadvantages, and its most likely impact on the most common gambling goals. Finally, I provided my thoughts on how to best optimize this winning strategy 1, only win immediately, followed by a summary conclusion. Remember to visit ProfessorSlots.com/subscribe to get my free report revealing the top 7 online resources for improving your gambling performance, including the one I've used as a top-tier slot machine casino gambler. Show notes for this episode are now available within most podcast apps, but are also available on my website at ProfessorSlots.com/E23. Up next is the second segment of the show, Maine slot machine casino gambling. In this episode segment, I provide a brief overview of the current state of gambling in a U.S. state, U.S. territory, or U.S. federal district, emphasizing, by far, anything of interest to slot machine casino gamblers. Here goes. Maine slot machine casino gambling exists. Maine has 2 casinos as well as 2 racinos, that is to say racetrack casinos. 1 casino and 1 racino offer slot machines. The second casino is an American Indian tribal casino offering only Class II gaming, including high-stakes bingo. Both racinos offer table games as well as the expected parimutuel wagering. Further, off-track betting is offered at 4 parimutuel parlors around the state, which do not have slot machines. The minimum legal age for gambling in Maine is 21 for slot machine casino gambling, 21 for poker rooms, 18 for parimutuel wagering, 18 for the lottery, and 16 for bingo. Maine state gaming regulations allow 2 casinos, the Hollywood Casino Bangor and the Oxford Casino, which for 2016 had a total net gaming revenue of $132 million. Slot machines at racinos were approved in 2003 via a statewide referendum, although it was rejected by registered voters in the city of Scarborough. To this day, as a result, the Scarborough Downs racetrack does not offer slot machines. In 2010, another statewide referendum approved the establishment of Oxford Casino, which offers slot machines and table games. Table games were allowed in 2011 for Hollywood Casino Hotel and Racetrack Bangor. Maine has 4 federally recognized American Indian tribes, which Maine law allows to offer high-stakes bingo games. Prize values for these bingo games are unlimited. Maine's Penobscot High-Stakes Bingo Casino has a bingo hall that seats 1,800 bingo players. Maine's legal rights with regards to tribal gaming is unusual relative to other states. The application of the Indian Gaming Regulatory Act of 1988 is excluded due to Maine's tribes being subjected to the Maine Indian Claims Settlement Act. Unlike most states with tribal gaming, tribal land in Maine is subject to state law. Maine's gaming regulations require a minimum return of 89% on all electronic gaming machines. Note that this state law requirement applies to Maine's tribal casino. Next up is a relatively short statement about slot machine private ownership, which I have included in case you live in this U.S. state and are considering owning a slot machine. Here it is. It is legal to privately own a slot machine in the U.S. state of Maine. The Gambling Control Board for Maine consists of 5 members appointed by the governor. This board is supported by the State of Maine Gambling Control Unit within the state's Department of Public Safety. In 2017, the Maine legislature assigned to the director of the Gambling Control Board the enforcement and administration of the laws governing fantasy sports, bingo, and games of chance. A review of these areas is currently underway, with proposed rules to be found at the Gambling Control Board's Rulemaking Information webpage. The stated mission of Maine's Gambling Control Board is, quote, to provide efficient, effective, and consistent regulation of authorized gaming in the state of Maine, end quote. In this next section, I'll discuss Maine gambling establishments. I've thought about not verbally telling you the names of each state's casinos, but I found I like to say the names of casinos. They are often interesting, sometimes hard to pronounce, but more personally, I just like saying them. However, as usual, the website links for each casino, assuming they have set up a website, is available by clicking on this segment in the show notes, available at professorslots.com/E23. Maine has 2 casinos and 2 racinos offering slots gambling, as well as harness racing. Harness racing is a form of racing where standard-bred horses trot or pace while pulling a 2-wheeled cart called a sulky. Off-track betting is also offered at 4 parimutuel parlors around the state. The largest gambling establishment in Maine is the Hollywood Casino Hotel and Raceway, Bangor. From mid-2015 through mid-2016, the average payout percentage for electronic gaming machines was 89.88%. The second largest is Oxford Casino. From early 2016 through mid-2016, this casino's average payout return percentage for electronic gaming machines was 91.44%. Hollywood Casino Hotel and Raceway Bangor in Bangor, Maine, is a racino. It has 923 gaming machines, 16 table games, and offers harness-style horse racing. Oxford Casino in Oxford, Maine, is a casino. It has 800 gaming machines and 22 table games. Penobscot High-Stakes Bingo Casino in Indian Island, Maine, is a tribal casino. It has pull-tab gambling, bingo gaming with 1,800 seats, and no website. Scarborough Downs Racetrack in Scarborough, Maine, is a racino, and it has harness-style horse racing. In summary, Maine slot machine casino gambling exists at one of 2 casinos as well as one of 2 racinos. These gambling establishments are Hollywood Casino Hotel and Raceway Bangor and Oxford Casino. Both facilities also offer table games. While the second casino does not offer slot machines, this tribal casino does offer high-stakes bingo games, seating up to 1,800 individuals. Parimutuel betting is available at both racinos, while off-track betting is offered at 4 parimutuel parlors around the state. Remember to visit professorslots.com/subscribe to get my free report revealing the top 7 online resources for improving your gambling performance, including the one I've used as a top-tier slot machine casino gambler. Next up is a 4-star review provided by Christopher T. Price from Amazon on February 23, 2018, for my Amazon Kindle ebook, Learning to Win. Title: A conscientious, fun, and informative read. Quote, Professor Slots knocks it out of the park with Learning to Win. His illustrative background and clear writing style make for a fun read. Even though I'm a seasoned gambler, I gleaned lots of information that I plan to put to use this year. End quote. If you'd like to provide a rating and review for this podcast, which may well help other slots enthusiasts to decide to take a listen to one or more of my episodes, simply use your podcast app, visit professorslots.com/Apple Podcasts if you're an Apple device user, or visit professorslots.com/Android for Android users. I'd also like to welcome new listeners to the show. Thanks to other gambling podcasts I've either been on or otherwise interviewed by. First, thanks to Vito at Cousin Vito's Casino Podcast for a fun and informative 30-minute interview on his podcast episode number 74, Beating the Machines with Professor Slots. Those interested can find this fun interview by visiting professorslots.com/interview4. That's ProfessorSlots.com/interview4, and you'll be taken directly to Vito's website. I have another interview coming up shortly, but I'll wait to tell you more about it once it's been actually released. Part 1 of the next episode of the Professor Slots podcast has once again not yet been determined. Tentative title is Winning Strategies 2. Part 2 of the next episode of the Professor Slots podcast is another brief overview of the current state of gambling in a U.S. state, territory, or federal district. This time, I'll be talking to you about the great U.S. state of Maryland. That's the end of another great episode of the Professor Slots podcast. Thanks so much for listening. Show notes for this episode can be found within most podcast apps or at ProfessorSlots.com/E23. I plan to have the next episode come out very soon for you, or I'll have more amazing content for the show. Until the next episode, have fun, be safe, and make good choices. Bye.